there's a lot of things out there to help them, either SRF program for funding or USDA for funding.
They're pumping per month. I'm going to talk per month. They're treating 8 million gallons a month. They're selling meter registered to
Oh my!
Colorado now. At least on the wastewater side, they're cracking down on that mentality and saying you don't have to audit your flows versus your population. So
there's a real mentality, especially among older operators, that if I share all that, I'm not going to be needed anymore.
The water loss has been a huge, right?
Yeah.
It comes up a ton. And I was kind of curious, how do you, when someone comes to you with that, like, hey, where do I start with this? Where do you kind of point them? What kind of resources do you send them?
So they need to have an asset management plan. Found that for systems under 500 connections, the average operator spent less than 25% of his time as a water operator. That they have a full-time job sometimes somewhere else, and very rarely do they even have a high school or a college degree. Eventually, they're all mechanical systems. They're going to fail. Whether that's in 5 years or 25 years or 50 years, they're going to fail.
All right, everyone, thanks for coming to the show today. I've got Steve with wateroperators.org.
Wateroperator.org, yeah.
Water operator, no S.
No S.
Thank you. Thanks for coming on today.
Sure.
So tell me a little bit about the mission and what you guys are trying to do.
So,
what you are doing.
Well, we are.
Trying.
We've been around since 2009. We're funded by US EPA through RCAP, the Rural Community Assistance Partnership, to provide resources and support for small systems. So those are systems EPA defines as under 10,000 people, or on the wastewater side under 1 million gallons a day of flow. So we're really a clearinghouse of information, trying to make it easy for operators to find the resources they need. They can also contact us, email us, or call us. And if there's something they can't find on our website, we will find it for them. And so it's been really successful. A lot of states know about us and make sure their operators are aware. We've been doing this again now for like 14 years or 15 years. So we're just trying to get more awareness by being at WEPTEC.
Okay, cool. So we've been surveying different Colorado municipalities, more rural ones, and we've been getting like lists of main problems, and you've probably heard a bunch throughout WEPTEC of some of the problems that general providers have. The water loss has been a huge, right?
Yeah.
It comes up a ton. And I was kind of curious, how do you, when someone comes to you with that, like, hey, where do I start with this? Where do you kind of point them? What kind of resources do you send them?
So there's two providers, the National Rural Water Association and RCAP, the Rural Community Assistance Partnership, that have technical assistance providers that are funded by EPA to go help those small communities, and it's all free. And so one of the things they can do is a water loss survey and figure out where that is, the smoke tests and all the other things. And I assume you're talking on the water side?
On the water,
yeah.
Distribution side.
There's a lot of water loss on the wastewater side, but it's interesting to know on that side how much water gets treated versus how much is actually being used. Because we have communities even in Illinois where they may pump 1 million gallons a day, or say 200,000 gallons a day, and they're treating 3 times that because of infiltration from shallow groundwater into their wastewater system. And so, but obviously on the drinking water side, if you have 30% water loss, that means you're putting 30% of your chemicals and time and effort and everything else. The costs are just so much more. So
I'll give you a real example, because I'm kind of personally trying to figure out where to even guide this group. They're pumping per month. I'm going to talk per month. They're treating 8 million gallons a month. They're selling meter registered to.
Oh my, yeah.
So you can do that math. That's 75%. It's actually 78%. I gave you a rough numbers.
Cool.
But my point is, there could be multiple main breaks wherever. Where do you guys kind of tell them to start looking once they know they have a problem? Now that I've kind of done an initial audit.
What I would tell you to do, or tell them to do, would be to contact RCAP. There's a provider in Colorado. They have staff in every state. They will come in and try to help them figure out where that is, why it is, get them down that road. There's funding available, especially now because of the infrastructure bill. there's a lot of things out there to help them, either, SRF program for funding or USDA for funding, depending on the community and whether they have low income folks, they can get grant forgiveness or principal forgiveness for part of that, all those sorts of things. So there's mechanisms in place for communities that are that small.
It's just getting them kind of aware that that's an option.
Right.
A lot of them.
I find it's actually hard to believe they don't know about those groups. But I believe.
In this case, which is odd because I think there is a reporting requirement to the state that they when I spoke with the operators in disbelief that was actually true. That the numbers were true. I was like, no, like yeah. So they were in disbelief, and I'm like, but a lot of times I think there's an actual reporting requirement, right? That they should be accounting.
So it depends. Every state has different rules. So in Illinois, water operators have to report their water use to the State Water Survey, but it's because of our Water Use Act, not because of our primacy agency and the things that are related to the Safe Drinking Water Act. And so it really depends where you're at. And I don't know particularly about Colorado, but I know in Wisconsin, for instance, they have a financial agency that they're required to submit asset management plans every year, which is great to help a system understand just understanding how their books work and what they need to do to be better and more sustainable. And so that would be identified in that case. And, they would help them seek help. So
that's so interesting. That asset management plan would be a complete enigma to some groups in Colorado, for example.
It is. A lot of small systems, but there's a lot of technical assistance and training out there to try to help them understand. They need to have an asset management plan. They need to, it can even have like a calendar for their stuff that needs to be on the schedule for sampling, but they need emergency response plans. They need to have, plans for all their operations so that if something happens to them, there's someone who can come in and figure it out. There's so many small systems, it's all in the operator's head. And I don't even go there.
I was like, well, I need to coin that phrase. Yeah. Like how many times I've heard.
Oh yeah,
it's in my head. How do you know what valve is? So can you show me? It's in my head. We can walk there. Like come up this week.
And there's a real mentality, especially among older operators, that if I share all that, I'm not going to be needed anymore. And it's just the opposite. Sharing those things and making sure there's others who are aware means that you have a little more freedom. You could take a vacation and somebody can help run your plant. It means that if something happens to you, you get hit by a bus tomorrow, you're not going to have your community out of luck.
Yeah.
And that's what they don't understand is that when they keep all that in their head, they're doing a disservice to their community, because if something did happen to them, there's no one who could come in and make sure their plants work.
They're going to cobble it together, and
somebody new has to come in. It's going to cost more money.
Yeah,
you may have to hire somebody. Yeah,
that's a really great point.
Yeah, it's really interesting. There's tons of small system problems, right? We could talk all day, honestly.
Well, so you were mentioning the I&I issue, which another big thing. Do you mostly just point them to RCAP? Do you guys have some suggested solution, things that they should be thinking about?
I&I.
Yeah, infiltration and inflow.
Sure.
Yep.
On the wastewater side, that is considered less of a problem because it's much cheaper to treat more water than it is to replace infrastructure. And so a lot of times you see that, and
it's rural, right? They have space. They could just add another influencing base.
Well, they can certainly, or they can make their lagoon bigger or whatever.
Right.
But it's also groundwater, so it typically is diluting, and so it's it's not as I won't say it's helpful because you're still treating a lot more water, but it depends on the groundwater. Shallow groundwater water table it depends on,
Well, an example is Colorado now, at least on the wastewater side, they're cracking down on that mentality and saying you don't have to audit your flows versus your population. So if you have 400 people, you should be averaging about 75 gallons per person per day. And if that's not what you're getting close to at the wastewater plant, you're getting 300 gallons per person per day. We're going to make you fix it. It's going to be a violation. So,
See, that's the first time I've heard that, because if you look even here at WEFTEC, now there's more talks on decentralized wastewater. There's systems that do these on-site packages, and they're meant to, instead of building infrastructure, like if there's you have to have a long sewer line to get to whatever, instead you can put in 2 smaller package plants and basically treat it in place. And then the community still maintains that, so they don't have all those infrastructure costs.
Right, yeah.
Yeah.
The
And
$4 million wastewater pipeline
Yeah.
to get to the next system.
well, I was at a meeting last week with all the state administrators, and someone gave a talk about a mobile home park with 42 homes, and it was going to cost $16 million to run sewer lines there. You can't, it's pretty hard to justify that, right?
Yep. Yeah, that one. Those have been popping up. Actually, yeah, that's been popping up a lot. Essentially, these mobile home parks, 400 units, and they're like, well, can we just do a small?
No, and now that's becoming a lot more common. And so it's we actually have started a new program just on decentralized wastewater.
Well,
So
it makes sense because now you're gonna need to really educate the contract operators, right? Because no one can run that full time. Well, they should hopefully.
well, we see it now, like they're called cluster systems, right? And so even like Nashville, Tennessee, they all their permitting is at the county level. They're building some of the new subdivisions as that grows and sprawls out. They're putting in cluster systems for a subdivision that's maybe 50 homes. And then they're doing the pumping, and the city's still taking care of it, but they're maintaining it as a separate system. And so they're all done the same way. It all then goes to they haul it to a central place, but it's just not sensible to run sewer lines
All over the place.
from there to wherever it needs to go to hook up.
So ultimately, like outfall and stuff like that. Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
So
What are some other big
problems?
problems that you see?
Well, there's a lot of issues with small systems, economy of scale, right? So even some, they don't have that expertise. Like we did a survey of operators in Illinois 12 years ago and found that for systems under 500 connections, the average operator spent less than 25% of his time as a water operator, that they have a full-time job sometimes somewhere else. And very rarely do they even have a high school or a college degree. So you have someone with a high school diploma who's running the plant that somebody else taught them. They're doing what they need to get by. They don't understand business side of things. So we see those systems are just maintaining. They're not saving money for when they do have infrastructure problems, which eventually you always do, even replacing a pump, things like that. And so that's one thing. The other is when you have a good young operator, once they get 3 or 4 years of experience, now they're eligible, if you will, to get a better, go up in class from a D to a C to a B or whatever. And now the bigger companies are interested in them.
Like a contract operator company?
American
Water.
or Denver Water,
They're wanting
American Water, any of those companies that maintain large systems or even a large municipal system, those guys are attractive then to them and they hire them away. And so then the small town starts over. I've always felt like we need to have an analogy to baseball. We need to have a minor league and a major leagues, and the major leagues are the large communities. They need to support the small towns because they're eventually going to pluck their operators. And
That's a great point.
No,
A small town interested in that
And then
individual.
they're basically helping the other community.
They can offer a better
Yeah.
employment package, whatever.
Yeah, I suggested to AWWA that they need to do a survey of some of the larger community systems and interview all their licensed operators and ask them where they came from.
To find
find out
what
how many small
come through the system.
Because I think you'll find it's a lot.
I never thought of that.
Yeah, so to me, if you take the St. Louis's of the world and they're pulling operators from all these small towns, why not work with the small town, have them be contracted to them reasonably, knowing that they're training their operators on different systems
And simpler, I'll call them simpler systems.
Yeah.
Less moving parts is what I mean.
And then they're keeping them in house. They're there as a more knowledgeable, more equipped, more have more capability when there is a problem with that system. And then they're all and then the system maintains its individuality, if you will, or they want to.
They might be able because they're using that bigger group. They might be able to write some SOPs and stuff for them.
Do all that stuff.
It's
Right.
like, oh, here's they can just kind of copy some.
Yep.
I'm not gonna say all their boilerplate language, but they can leverage some of that administrative lift that they've already done, and then kind of bring some of those.
I believe Colorado has a group that creates SOPs, and they're made to come available to anyone that's a member, but you have to pay to be a member. And so that lets all the small systems out of that. So, that group in Colorado, it'd be good to reach out to them.
Yeah.
Figure out if they have, how can they support small systems better? So, I saw a talk on that a few years ago. I don't remember who any of the players are there, but there is that program.
Okay.
So, and it's private, I think. So,
Okay.
no, there's a ton of issues, workforce issues, financing issues.
Oh, is it Indigo Water? Maybe. She trains a lot of the op.
No, that's no. Her name's escaping me. No, I know her because she has a lot of training. She gave a talk last year and evaluated a lot of the online training that's out there, and it was really interesting to see the good and the bad of what operators can learn versus what they're paying for, some of those things. So no, I know the owner of Indigo Water. She does some good work. So
yeah, everyone's giving pretty good feedback. So.
Yeah.
Cool. So the operator kind of training cycle getting plucked off, that's one of the biggest ones. What are some other hurdles? You talked about the financial planning
just having the expertise to really, and the time, right? You may have one person who's running a plant. Sometimes they won't even travel 100 miles to go get training because they can't leave their plant. And so there's groups that pop up to do training nearby them or whatever.
No redundancy.
No. And nor do they understand that they really have to set their rates so that they do have money in the bank, because eventually, they're all mechanical systems. They're going to fail, whether that's in 5 years or 25 years or 50 years, they're going to fail. And if you don't have those resources, back after the EPA started in the 70s and 80s, Congress came in and they bought new plants for all these communities as earmarks and things like that. That's not going to happen anymore. Communities have to learn how to be sustainable, or eventually they're going to be forced, like what you're talking about in Colorado, forcing them as a wastewater system. It'll be really interesting to see how that all works, because I could see some of those failing totally financially, and somebody else coming in and taking it over as, not a good situation. So, but small systems should also consider their neighbors and sharing operators. You have, my hometown, 350 connections. This is going on right now. The other town, that the two towns have a school district. I graduated from there. High school doesn't exist anymore. At 19, my graduating class.
Okay. Yeah.
But they can't get along enough to put a water system in together. And so they're both going to do it on their own. But it's going to be so much more difficult for them to maintain that, be able to pay back the loan if they get one from USDA, all those things that if they shared an operator, shared resources, whenever you need to order chlorine, if you buy it in more bulk, you get
a better rate. Right.
All those things, and looking at those economies of scale. And why not have 4 or 5 communities go together for an operator that they control, they pay, versus each of them hiring a contract operator that may have systems 100 miles away, and they don't get the service they would if they had somebody locally. So there's a lot of issues, but some of that is fierce independence of a small town wanting to stay themselves, be their own sustainable entity.
Yeah.
And they need to realize that having a shared operator or even a shared system doesn't mean they're not independent. It just means that they're more likely to be sustainable down the road. So it's tough to sell that.
Yeah, because it literally goes in a lot of cases town planner, manager, ORC. That's all.
Oh no, yeah.
So there's just like this huge gap, right? Like you go to a bigger system, there's a manager, there's a district manager.
Oh, right.
Call it a
superintendent.
There's a guy below that guy.
Yeah.
Like there's actually layers.
A distribution person versus a treatment person, right, or groups. Yeah.
You've got one person on all 4 parts of the system: the water, wastewater, the treatment, both sides.
Yeah. And we actually when we first started this was funded by the Office of Water, the drinking water side. And we went back to EPA after a couple of years and said, one person in a lot of these small towns is running both. So it doesn't make sense for us not to put the wastewater training on here too, because it's the same person. Why not make it eligible for all that? So they agreed. And now we provide water and wastewater stuff.
Perfect. So if anyone wants to learn more information, get training and stuff, it's wateroperator.org.
Yes, that's our site, and it's all free. They can call us, just look us up online. Thanks for the plug.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Nice to meet you.